Good morning, real estate agents.
Hey, good morning. My name's Trent Van Ort. I'm with the Mankato office.
Jeff Call. I'm the broker. I am in the Mankato office. We are in the giant conference room this morning.
Yes. Welcome to the marketing trends and data analytics conversation.
Yes, we're happy to be here. Trent and I practiced a little bit yesterday. He had some good ideas. He's got 4 points he wants to bring up initially. And then the chat room is open. We're willing to take any questions that you've got. And I think we're going to spend maybe more time on trends than stats.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody really likes talking numbers, talking statistics. They're kind of boring to talk about, at least for the most part. But I think my experience as an agent who's been doing this for maybe 13 years, and I know, Jeff, you've talked about this too, is real estate transactions are very emotional. The stakes are so high, and when you get emotional, it kind of brings out the worst in some of us.
Yep.
And that's for clients and for us as realtors. Things start going maybe a way that you weren't expecting, and then you get on edge. So I think it's important to use those statistics and that data to kind of level the playing field, level your emotions, and take some of the guesswork out of it. So a couple statistics that I always try to look at, because we all get told our local market is different than what's happening nationwide, and what's happening in your little community is different than what happens maybe in the metro. And so some of the statistics that I'm always watching are how many listings are hitting the market every month, and which month do homes get listed more frequently. And for like our market, December is our worst month for listings. We only list an average of 24 homes. And May is our best month. We list over 100 homes every month. So that's an important statistic that is not readily available on your MLS. You have to kind of go back and look at each month individually through the years and kind of record that. And it's a tougher statistic for me to find, at least through our MLS, Paragon. I don't know, Northstar, I'm not familiar with.
It is. I had that question asked yesterday.
Okay.
I was out working with a brand new client, first time we ever met, and he wanted to talk about when is a good time to put the property on the market.
Yeah.
So we discussed November, December, January, February, and he was grateful for that information and maybe helping him and his family make a decision on when to put the property on the market.
Yeah, and if you're listing your house and only 24 other homes are getting listed that month, that might be an advantage.
Absolutely.
I don't know. Did our camera go off here?
Yep,
Sorry about that.
Your camera might go in and out just with a little bit of internet connection in the weather, but we can still hear you.
Got it. So if you're just looking at that one statistic, you might think, well, only 20 other homes are getting listed in my area. December's a great time to list. There's less competition. But the second point that I take a lot of care in considering and looking into is how many offers get accepted each month. So I don't look at closings, how many homes closed each month. I actually, through Paragon and our MLS, we can look at contract accepted day. And so what I've noticed is historically, again, December is one of our worst months. We're only accepting 30 some contracts in December. And again, May is one of our better months. We're accepting over 100 contracts in May. And so playing that fine line of when is the inventory shrinking and when is the inventory increasing, and getting your listing lined up with that is great. but we all know listings aren't going to just come in March, April, May at the perfect time. But that's why we just know these statistics so we can share with our seller, look, the optimal time might be April to list your house, and we're in December. We're still going to sell your house. We're still going to have a great transaction. Just know that those multiple offers and that 3 days on market and all that activity that your neighbor experienced in May might not be the case for you in December.
Correct. I totally agree with that.
The third statistic that I really look at then, kind of going along with all of those, is the current number of active listings. Active listings kind of can give you a gauge on where the market is going. So if the number of active listings, available inventory is climbing, then your market's getting softer for a buyer and getting better, or excuse me, softer for a seller and getting better for a buyer. If the inventory is shrinking, well, then the opposite must be true, is you're going to see home prices going up and multiple offers happening. And for our local area, and I'm assuming this is statewide, inventory is climbing. We've seen where our inventory hit a low of 75 homes available in our school district, and that was just 2 years ago. That's climbed to 140 available homes, which is still pretty darn low. In my time here, I've seen that number as high as 800 available homes on a given day. So 140 is still quite low, but it's climbing. And so what that tells me, and what I'm telling my sellers, is the market is trending towards, it's getting a little bit tougher to sell your house, especially if I look at the average price point of those active homes. It's a very high number. Our active listings, the average price of those available homes is higher than our average sold price. So that's telling me, which I can tell then my sellers, is our high-end homes aren't selling.
That is right.
And if you can sit down at a listing table and say, look, your home is priced well above the market average, it's going to take a little bit longer to sell. They need to know that so they can prepare mentally. But then if you're representing a buyer, and they're thinking, wow, we got to go over asking and put our best foot forward, well, we might be able to negotiate on those higher end homes because they are sitting, depending on the property. So.
Right. You need to know what's hot in your market. I had this new client yesterday ask me that question. What price range is hot? Is our type of property popular right now? And he had a hobby farm. It's like 6 acres, a 1970s house on it that needs a lot of work. And I told him that down here, properties that are 300, 350 and under are pretty hot. I mean, there's buyers that'll look at them. There's contracts being offered. And also for me and a couple other agents I've talked to down here, rural properties are popular too right now, just because there hasn't been a lot of them. So folks are out there looking at them. I was out last night in the snowstorm showing a hobby farm. So you need to know what's hot and what's not in your marketplace.
Yeah, I also like to pay attention to the average or median household income, especially with where interest rates have really made affordability difficult. If your area has an average, or in this, you can usually look this information up. If your median household income, let's say, is $75,000, well, then you can kind of look at the math and say, what would that household be able to afford for a house? And if you're meeting with the seller and they want $600,000 for their house, you can just tell them, hey, we're looking for somebody that can afford not a $600,000 house, but a $4,500 a month housing obligation. And sometimes when I tell sellers that, like, hey, the person buying this house needs to be able to afford $4,500 a month, they kind of look at me in shock, like, oh my gosh, I never considered that. I just thought, homes are worth a lot more than they used to be. And their payment on it was maybe $1,200. And so $4,500 puts things into perspective that, hey, not many people can afford your house, therefore it might take longer to sell.
Yep, absolutely. That's a fact. That's a fact. I don't know where you're getting that information,
Mm-hmm.
Trent, on the average household income,
Yeah.
but I usually assume something around 100.
Mm-hmm.
That's the number that I usually work with.
So the Census Bureau puts out some of that
Okay.
information, but I would urge you guys to have a good relationship with a lender, because sometimes a local lender, like we have Rusty here with Atwood Mortgage, that you can just ask, Rusty or Brian, for all the applications that you're getting, what do you feel is pretty common? So in Mankato, we have a large rental population. We have college students here. We have a lot of rentals. And so that would change maybe the demographic and the household income. But of the people looking at homes, that might look a little different. So that's one thing that I consider.
It's important.
Yeah. And I think another statistic that when I work with sellers, that I really rely heavily on, and some of this just comes from experience and conversation with other realtors in your office, is paying attention to how many showings it takes to sell a house. And when the market was slow, I mean, I got my license in 2011. I started selling, mostly because I was late in 2011, 2012. The market was not great. But even then, it took 8 to 12 showings to sell a house. And today, it still takes 8 to 12 showings to sell a house. It's just a matter of, do you get those showings in 2 days or 7 months? And telling a seller, at least for me, knowing that, telling a seller, look, it takes 8 to 12 showings. Then from there, you can build on that and say, okay, why haven't we gotten 8 to 12 showings? Do the pictures not look good? Is the price so high that online it doesn't look worth it? Or are buyers just not out looking? And that's kind of where the experience and the conversations with other agents comes into play, because you can't really look that information up. That's not available information just on your MLS. You have to talk to people and say, hey, how many showings did you get? I saw you got an offer.
Right.
And yeah, obviously we know you can sell a house in 1 or 2 showings, but if it takes 8 to 12 showings to sell your house and you've only had 3, then you can say, let's work on getting more showings. How can we do that? But if you've had 20 or 30 showings, that means something too. And in my mind, that means the house looked good enough online to get people through the door, but once they got there, they were disappointed. And so when I'm sitting at a listing table and I say, look, I'm expecting 8 to 12 showings for, some good activity, I follow that up and say, if we've had 15, 20, 30 showings and it hasn't sold, I think that means we need to do a price reduction. Unless there's something totally obviously, hindering the sale of that property. But a price reduction will solve that. So if you give them that information at the listing table, when it comes time to ask for the price reduction, it is so much easier, because you can say, look, when I listed this, our goal was 8 to 12 showings. We've had 20. I really think that means we're overpriced. What do you think? And they'll usually tell me, yeah, we've been thinking that. Okay, great. Let's drop the price. So that's a key thing, that it's measurable, but the data isn't available. You have to ask a lot of different people. You have to look at your own listings and kind of come up with that. But I've heard other agents nationwide give that number too. I follow different people on Instagram and listen to podcasts, and that number I think is pretty consistent. So feel free to use that one.
It is for me personally too, on my own properties that I have listed with the number of showings. And that leads me into something that Trent and I had a long discussion about yesterday, is that when you're doing meeting with the seller specifically and you're trying to price that new listing that you really want, you need to get across the table from them, get eyeball to eyeball, and get deep into the conversation on why you're coming up with the pricing you are on that house using the statistics that Trent has mentioned, but already lay the groundwork early on for why you think the house is worth X dollars, especially when the seller looks at you and says, well, I think you're 10, 12, $15,000 low. You can say, you know, I really want your listing. And yeah, the inventory is not terrific right now. We can try it at that. However, I still feel that this range starting down here, which is quite a bit lower than you want to start at, is where we should be. But you need to have that conversation early on. So when the time comes when you do need to talk about a price reduction or changing some other item on your listing, it's easier to have that conversation with that seller because you had it early on. And now your ideas initially are coming to fruition. I've dealt with that
Yeah.
literally dozens of times.
I think a lot of us are people pleasers, or as salespeople want to be people pleasers. And when we get a hunch, or we feel that the seller really overvalues their home or wants to list it higher than what it should be listed at, we immediately just want to make them happy. So we say, yep, let's do it. You know, we'll figure this out. And that is a terrible idea. It's a recipe for disaster. You're going to lose sleep at night. They're not going to like you. My strategy has been, if you want to list it there, I am so excited for your business. I'm going to work very hard to get you as much money as possible for your house. But I do think everything I'm looking at says your home is worth, you know, not that number. And so telling them that you want their business, that you're eager for their business, that you're going to work very hard for them and try to get them that probably unrealistic number will help them have confidence in you and still want to hire you despite you not agreeing with their price. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to just agree with them in order to win their business. And in fact, I've had sellers that were so grossly overpriced that I'm just like, I can't afford to lose that much sleep at night, and I'm just not going to work with you. So you have to be prepared for that. But
okay, another thing we discussed yesterday is when you're out on that initial CMA, is having a knowledge of what the costs are to get obvious shortcomings repaired or updated on a listing.
Yeah.
I do a lot of rural stuff, work with a lot of rural stuff, and you need to have a general knowledge of what it costs to pump a septic tank, have a compliance check done, put in a brand new system if one is going to be needed. Try to acquire some knowledge on bathroom renovations. I just dealt with this twice yesterday, and luckily I've got enough information up in my noggin right now, and I've got enough guys like Trent and everybody else around here to run questions by. Have you dealt with this before? What does it cost you to do this? It helps you when you got one of your comps that's got a brand new septic system in it, and everything else about the subject property you're working on is similar to that comp, except your subject needs a new septic system. You need to be able to look at that person and say, your septic system is going to be 22 to 25 grand. You can't say 10 because it's not going to be 10 anymore. You change the expectations of your potential seller. So having some general knowledge of it is good. And again, that's where talking, with agents in your office, having coffee, discussing it at sales meetings, whatever needs to be done. Offer help. I just did this at the sales meeting on Tuesday. It's like, I'm always available to go out and help, somebody with price a house. And I know Trent is too. So we need to be collaborative.
On that, you reminded me of something too. Sometimes I list with sellers who are very optimistic. They see that their neighbor's house sold for a certain dollar amount and they assume theirs should too. but their neighbor's home was well painted, new flooring, and very clean. And your subject property might not be those things. And so just kind of having in the back of your mind what a painter costs to paint the house, what a cleaning lady costs or cleaning person costs to clean the whole house. I even have kind of in the back of my mind what dumpster fees are. And sometimes you can take a home that just needs paint and flooring and make it worth quite a bit more money. And how I present that to a seller is I say, look, I don't want to ask you to invest $10,000 into your home just so that it's sellable and you get that $10,000 back or $7,000 back. I want to find the ways where you can invest $1,500 into your home and get $10,000 back. And if you want something like that, then let's talk about it. If there's a way for us to invest $5,000 or less, but you get $10,000 or more for your house, do you want to do that? Sometimes they go, yeah, let's talk about that. And a lot of times they go, no, I just want my house sold. Okay, well, what you've told me now is it's more about getting your house sold for a fair price, but pretty quickly versus getting top dollar. And if your house doesn't show well, you should probably be erring on the low side of your CMA, because buyers, they have to assume that risk. So when they look at your paint and flooring, they don't go, well, that should be $2,400 to paint the house and another $4,500 for flooring. They go, ooh, that's going to be $15,000, because they're assuming that risk. They have to err on the side of caution and inflate that number. And so your seller will typically lose out by going that route, but it's what's best for them. That's what they want. So just having the conversation.
Yeah, so having general knowledge of repairs and maintenance on houses is good for buyers too.
Yeah.
When you're out showing that house and they're going, oh, it needs this, this, and this, and it's gonna cost this much, and typically they're gonna inflate it,
Right. Absolutely.
extremely inflate it.
Absolutely. Double it a lot of times.
Yeah, so you need to have that conversation. So,
Bringing up buyers, some statistics that I like to look at for buyers and sellers too is looking at what the sold prices are versus the asking price in their specific price point. So if you have a $250,000 house, the buyer's looking at, or the seller's considering selling, just looking and seeing, okay, the sold prices for those homes, are they coming in 5% less than asking? Are they selling over asking? And by how much? Because when you're showing homes to a buyer, and we've all had this, where you have a buyer looking at $250,000 homes and they, in their mind, think they're going to negotiate $30,000.
Mhm.
And they go, well, our budget is 200, but we figured we'd look at homes at 250. And you can just continually remind them, hey, most of the houses we look at, they're negotiating about $3,000, or they're negotiating $6,000, and just continually reminding them, like, let's get our expectations that that's the amount you're going to have to negotiate. Or many of these homes are selling $10,000 over asking, and that is especially, I don't know what it is. It seems like when dads get involved, that seems to be my biggest struggle. Is dad's like, nope, we're going to get this house 30 grand less than the asking
mhm.
because this doorknob's loose. And it's like, I don't know. That's not what I've been seeing. And here's actually the data to back that up. That's important. And if you get in, I actually learned this a few years ago when multiple offers started becoming commonplace,
Mhm.
looking to see how much over asking. And at the time, $3,000 over asking was pretty common. We had never seen a house sell like 5 or 10 grand over asking.
Right.
And so when I looked at that number, I could tell my buyer confidently, if you go 5 grand over asking, you have a really good chance of getting it. Well, then all of a sudden that changed pretty quickly. And it was like, well, geez, we don't know, 20, 30 grand over asking. We've seen it.
Oh, yeah.
And paying attention to those little nuances, like how much over or how much under is common, so that, because we know, like, when we're making offers and we're showing houses, we kind of know this information, we've experienced it, but we don't really know how to convey that. And the buyers and sellers, they don't know this. They only do this once or twice, in their lifetime. We
Right.
do it all the time, and we forget that they don't understand those nuances.
And especially buyers. And it's changing, the trends are changing almost every month.
Yeah,
There's some kind of a change.
yeah,
And buyers they do need to be made aware of that fact. Um, right now, for me, that, like I said, the rural properties, I mean, it's not uncommon for them to go over asking, but it's not a lot.
yeah.
It's not a lot. I just had one just recently that had 16 showings on it, and there was 3 offers,
Hmm.
and every offer was like $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 over asking price. That's
Mhm.
all.
Yeah.
But
A lot of this information we only get from experience. Like if you're working with 5 buyers, all looking at $250,000 homes, you're getting a really good idea of the market
Yep.
for that specific type
Yep.
of home. But then if all of a sudden you're listing a $400,000 house and you haven't been working with buyers in that price range,
Yep.
you suddenly don't have the knowledge that you maybe thought you had, and you project or you think that $250,000 price point is the same as the 400, and it's probably not.
It's not.
But having continual like I come into the office as much as possible, and then when somebody shares with me that they sold a house or listed a house, I'm always asking, like, what are you experiencing? Are you getting showings this week? And a lot of times I'm kind of surprised. Sometimes I see a listing, I'm like, oh, there's no way they're going to sell for that. And I go, are you getting showings? And the other agent will be like, yeah, we had 7 and 2 offers. And I'm just like, holy smokes, I did not realize. Um, and sometimes it's the opposite. I would have thought that house sold already. How many showings have you had? Well, only 2. Wow, I'm caught off guard by that too. And so having those conversations with other agents in your office makes you so much more knowledgeable, which is important because one of the things I wanted to bring up today is every time I am out in public and I see somebody I know, they ask me the same darn question.
Yeah.
It's
the market like?
What's the market like? Every single time. And early in my career, I always, oh, it's great. It's great. Because I wanted them to think that I was busy and I was a good agent or something. And it's great. It's kind of a boring way to bring it up or to tell them how the market is, because it's not great for everybody. For buyers, it's horrible. For buyers in a $200,000 price point, it is horrible.
Yeah, because they can't find anything.
Yeah. For a seller who has a $700,000 home in town, it's horrible. And so just having, I don't myself, I don't have a great answer to it. I just go with whatever I'm feeling that day. But having a good response and being prepared for that, I think makes you look like a knowledgeable professional. And don't bore them with a bunch of statistics. They don't really care. They're just making small talk, but your answer may remind them that you are the local expert. You are the person when they do have the serious question on the market. Maybe let's call Trent, or maybe let's call Jeff, or those Atwood agents seem to have a good grasp on the market. And when my aunt is having trouble selling her house, I'm going to call Trent quick and see what he says. That's sometimes all it takes.
Right.
So
I think that the buyers today, because prices have gotten so high, they become more critical about anything they find wrong looking at the house, because they're being asked to consider paying so much for it. They don't want to have a long laundry list of things they need to do right away.
right, they can't afford it.
They can't afford to do it. So again, that goes back to having an idea of what it costs to do things. And I want to have this is a little bit off the subject, but have another discussion with Brian and Rusty from Atwood Mortgage, and maybe get a little deeper into doing a renovation loan, especially when you get that stuff that's first time buyer price range and it needs a lot of work. The first time buyer has saved up the money for the downstroke, don't have the money for the improvements. If you use a renovation product, you can roll all of that stuff in.
You can solve one of those problems.
You can solve one of those problems. But we rarely talk about renovation loans. And there was a time in my career when they were like really popular and I used them a lot. But you need to have a qualified licensed general contractor to be in charge of a project that you get involved in. They don't have to do any of the work. But if you're doing a renovation loan and the new homeowner wants to do a bunch of it themselves, that's fine, as long as you have a licensed contractor that's been assigned to the project is in charge of seeing that everything gets done properly. And I know there's a bunch of renovation products out there, conventional and FHA. I don't know if VA has one or not, but
Yeah, if you are working with a buyer and their price point, you know, dictates that they're not going to find everything on their wish list, it's good to have that kind of tool.
Yep.
On the flip side, if you're working with a seller and their house maybe needs a bunch of renovations and they can't afford to do it, you know, it's a good tool. But I would urge my sellers to maybe find a way to do those repairs ahead of time, because my experience has been my buyers have no imagination.
yeah,
Not only do they can't I mean, there's a reason home flippers make money. They don't have the vision on what it could look like with just paint and flooring and maybe some light fixtures, but they also have no knowledge on what it takes to do those. You know, they are not experienced in replacing light fixtures and painting, and they don't know the cost of it. And so if you just knew the cost to hire it out, you could say, look, to hire this job out is X amount of dollars. If you do it yourself, you may save some of those dollars. That's a really good start. But with the seller, just reminding them, like, look, the buyers we're working with, they're stretching themselves just to buy this house, so they can't afford the extra monthly costs of updating, but then also they don't have the vision. When I bought my first house, it was a foreclosure and I couldn't afford to not have vision. Like, it was a piece of junk. And that life experiences has taught me what it takes. But so many people, they're just not able or willing, and we have to just, accept that and
Yep.
figure out those costs for
and
them.
if you want to make a deal, that's right. You need to arm yourself with the knowledge needed to help sellers do the right thing and buyers do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you may end up helping them do something that they never dreamed of.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to take it upon yourself to educate yourself and arm yourself with all that knowledge.
Yeah. I think our job obviously is very relationship oriented, and meeting people to build your business is important. But the more you can be knowledgeable in as a market, like, if you're calling your stockbroker, you're expecting him to have good market knowledge and kind of understanding the trends. Like, that's what you're hoping for. I think we should be that way too, understanding what home prices are doing and why. Not just, oh, I've been so busy, but I don't know why. Or no, nobody's looking at homes. We don't know why. Trying to dig deeper in your local market and figuring that out is very important.
Yep. Real estate is local. I heard that the first week I got in the business back in 1977. Real estate is local. It still is local. And you need to learn what your locality is all about, period.
Yeah. And one thing that I've done is I work multiple small communities. I just take the biggest, Mankato is the biggest community. I just take that specific market and track it very, very closely. And then I just kind of assume the little surrounding towns are going to follow some of the same trends, because you can't, like, my mom's a real estate agent in central Minnesota, and she works like 3 larger communities, and there's no way to keep track of all of that. That would be really difficult. And so if you can just pick one town or community and just track those numbers very closely, I would imagine the surrounding communities are going to be pretty similar, but it'll just make you feel a lot more confident when you are advising. We all give our customers advice, and we know in our heart or in our stomach that we're giving them the right advice. But when you have a challenging customer who wants to question you, which happened to me a lot when I was 24 years old as a new agent, knowing those numbers gives you the confidence to say, you know what, I've looked at the numbers and I feel confident that what I'm telling you is pretty true. It just gives you that confidence. And I think buyers and sellers feel that when you're not sure, they're not going to trust you.
That's right.
So
and having these conversations in person, being an older real estate agent, I think is very important. You can't just rely on the laptops or desktops that we're all looking at right now for your means of getting all this information across.
to your client.
Yeah, to your clients, you have to ask for that appointment. And you know something, even if the client is somewhat reluctant on the front end, if you do have that appointment, it's, for me, it just works. It's like I've had new buyers say, this was so good. This was so informative, and they feel better about working with you.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't, I mean, I come from a time when we didn't have computers when I got in the business. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I love AuthentiSign and everything else that I use,
Absolutely.
but it doesn't mean that that you can just skip meeting face to face. You got to do that more often
Yeah,
in your business.
I've noticed, just if you haven't found out, I track everything. And one of the things I've tracked is just my real satisfied.
Yeah.
And it's not the real satisfied results. It's not about did I get lower results or higher results than, that 2012 versus 2024. In the early stages of my career, many of my customers would give me a real satisfied survey. They would do the whole thing without me even asking. They would just do it. They were satisfied with the transaction. And I'd get a lot of repeat business just without even trying. It just happened because I was seeing these people all the time. 11 o'clock at night, they wanted to sign a purchase agreement. We were meeting together face to face at 11 o'clock at night. Fast forward to the last 5 years, AuthentiSign has removed that personal, connection, that personal relationship. I see these people so little that now they don't do the real satisfied survey unless I ask them or beg them to do it. And it's very, very transactional. So I'm not getting the same repeat business as just a given. And I, at least in my mind, I feel like I'm a much more competent and informed and knowledgeable agent as somebody who has been in it for 13 years. But you would think, looking at my repeat business and my real satisfied surveys, that the last 5 years I've been a terrible realtor, and which may be true, I don't know, but I actually do attribute that to AuthentiSign. I love AuthentiSign. I can fill out a purchase agreement at midnight, send it over, but you miss out on a whole conversation that you could have had talking about some of these statistics,
Right.
Talking about small talk and building that relationship. And so that is something that I have tracked over the last 13 years is my clients don't know me that well. And whether the transaction went the way that they wanted or not, there's just not that connection. I'm losing business because of AuthentiSign.
And the contacting with other agents that you're working with,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's in-house or from another office, I have found that I can usually get something done quicker and with neither myself nor the other agent coming unglued if I even pick up the telephone and have a conversation with that person rather than always relying on text and email.
Mm-hmm.
I'm dealing with that on 2 deals right now. And I make a lot more headway if I have conversations, actual conversations with the agent. you can't meet face to face constantly.
Right.
So sometimes you got to look at the next best method. And again, I love AuthentiSign. I've used it a lot,
I do too. Yeah.
but you just don't let it eliminate that personal contact. Don't let it totally eliminate it.
Yeah. Looks like we've switched from market trends and data analytics to words of wisdom from Jeff. So,
Well, to me, it's my market trend. I would like to see everybody use that.
yeah.
I also think we talked quite a bit about knowing what things cost. Maybe the managers at each office, myself included, maybe we should invite some speakers into our sales meetings and maybe get updated on certain things that come up on transactions. And, have an electrician come in, have a basement waterproofer come in, have a radon mitigation company come in, just get us all updated on those kinds of things. I don't know. It's an idea. I think I'll look into it and try to implement some of that right here in the Mankato office. So,
Yeah. I think the biggest thing though for me is it's not necessarily knowing all of these statistics. It's about collecting data for me, because you learn to know them and understand them if you actually collect it. And um, it can be just mental notes, but some of these trends I've had to create Excel spreadsheets and just write them down, because how else would I remember the average days on market for a home getting listed in December, or the average sale price that we have, for 2022 versus 2023 versus 2024. Like, you just have to, if you really want to know your market, you have to start collecting some of this. And it is tedious and it is boring, but you will find you will be so much more knowledgeable when it comes time to working with the buyer or seller. So that's, I guess, really all I have. Does anybody have any questions?
Lynn Gudgeon. That popped up really briefly.
Lori asks, Trent, typically where do you get your data? The MLS or where?
Yeah, good question, Lori. So we have Paragon is our platform down here, and you guys probably have, a lot of you have North Star. So I'm not as familiar with the fields and the search criteria that North Star offers, but I use Paragon for all of my local data. And we can change our fields and we can look, like contract acceptance date was a field that I could add in Paragon. And listing date was just given to us. That was just the standard default search criteria. But yes, my local MLS. And if you call, like for us, we can call our board office and ask them how to help search some of those fields in our MLS. The other day this spring I was listing a home that had a swimming pool, and I wanted to search just homes with swimming pools. And I thought we had a search criteria for that. And we didn't. And I called my MLS and I said, you can input that we have swimming pools, and if it's heated or in ground or above ground, how can I search that? And she unfortunately could not help me with that specific thing. But when you want specific data, you have to do it yourself, because so many of the reports you're going to get from like nationwide news, so many reports you get are, you don't really know all the parameters, and it can be kind of skewed. Like we get MLS updates once a month, but it's for the whole southern Minnesota MLS, not just maybe our school district, Mankato School District. And so I set those parameters that I watch, and I get it directly from my MLS. Good question,
Yeah,
Larry.
and our MLS also has direct access to state statistics as well. So we can just at least we do, and I think North Star has it as well.
Mhm.
Trent, when you're presenting the information to either a buyer or a seller, and you just brought up a great point because there's so many different areas that make up these numbers that maybe other agents are presenting if they're also at a listing appointment. How do
Yes.
you bring it up to those clients to really hone in on the area where your stats are coming from? How are you able to explain that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I wish I would have been prepared and brought one of my market analysis, my CMA presentations that we could have uploaded, but I have made my own CMA presentation and I created it on PowerPoint. And so I input all of the data. It's not like a preloaded tool that we have through Century 21. But somebody told me, I don't know if it was something I heard from like a Warren Buffett thing or somewhere I read that said you should be able to present information to somebody like they have a 5th grade education. And if a 5th grader can understand it, then you will be trusted and they will be able to retain that information. So I've made my market analysis really cut and dried, and I have clear imagery that basically conveys what I want to tell that seller, and it is written down. And so not only does it ensure that I actually go over that specific statistic, but then it gives me credibility. So when another agent gives them a inflated number or a number that contradicts what I said, mine's in writing with the evidence clearly shown, and it gives me the credibility. So when they look at that market analysis that I've printed out and given, and I will not email it. I have to present it in person because I want to get a fair shake. I don't want them to see the data and go, oh, this doesn't agree with my preconceived notions. I'm not going to use Trent. But they have that in writing, clear, concise. It's colorful, so that I have that credibility. Good question, Lori. I can't read that. Oh,
I'm going to let Leslie ask a question. She's got her hand raised. So give me one second, Leslie, and I'll unmute you and you can go ahead and ask your question. All right, Leslie, there you go.
Yep. Have you used InfoSparks at all for any of your data?
I have not, and I've actually have not even heard of InfoSparks. Tell me about it.
So last summer I was found myself in Minneapolis. I'm in the Fergus Falls, Otter County area. It's where I work. And I saw this person sort of took command of the North Loop area and had put, this is how many homes sold, and then it said, asterisk, information provided by InfoSparks. So I started doing that locally here and would look up we have lakes here. So I would do everything that's sold, everything that's pended in this month on a certain lake, and just trying to farm that specifically. And I seem to be the only one that knows to get there in our area, at least. But you would be amazed at how much data it gives you. How I get to it is through Matrix, because I have North Star MLS, but and I get kind of confused, and Mariana probably can help with this, but I have access to Matrix, but I think I also have it. I think everybody has it. I just know it's strange path to get there, but once you get it and bookmark it, honestly, I run our own local spreadsheets to make sure the data is correct. It's correct, and it gives a lot of great information.
Yeah, no, I love that. I wrote it down actually, so I'm gonna look into that after we get off of this.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that either, but I will educate myself on it as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Les. Anybody else?
I know Sarah wrote in the chat, just wanted to throw out there that in the Fergus Falls area, Battle Lake, Otter Tail, they do have an EMV versus sold spreadsheet that they update on a monthly basis for all of their agents. So it's just another tool that's out there. It's interesting to see the percentage over the EMV, and it's really helpful tool during that listing meeting. They wanted to share that.
Yeah, I love that. No, statistics can be overwhelming. There's so many different numbers out there. Making sense of it all can be a challenge. And then even if you have all that information, conveying that to somebody in a clear and concise way can be tough, but I do think it's very helpful. So
I've had issues the last couple of years, especially where a seller has gone on realtor.com or Zillow or RPR or their local county website and have picked one of those who give the highest valuation of their property and think that that's right, that that's got to be it. So I have made it a practice of mine that when I do a CMA, I include realtor.com's valuation and Zillow's valuation. And then I use my own valuation, and which of course is much more detailed. And I've been through their house, and you have to point out that Zillow hasn't been through your house,
right,
nor has realtor.com. But occasionally, the two of them together, plus the own numbers that I've arrived at, actually help bring it together.
yeah,
Well, that always helps bring it together, but sometimes the valuations are close and sometimes they're really far apart. But if my statistics are correct and my comps are good, I can show them why mine means more than these other ones do.
yeah.
So I've been using that a lot.
Lori had one more question. She asked if there are any personalities of clients that you don't share stats with, or do you always use them?
So with my market analysis, with my CMA presentation, I was very intentional about including a lot of photos and a lot of color.
Absolutely.
As well as graphs and charts and numbers. And it's been my experience, if you're working with maybe a couple, two people that own the home, one of them is more interested in the numbers and one of them could care less. But it's almost like sitting at a poker table. I am trying to see if their eyes are just glazed over and they're just not listening to me, because then I'll just touch on it and gloss over it. But sometimes they're very intent and then they ask me very good questions and it's like, okay, we got somebody who cares, let's dive deeper. But yeah, you bring up a good thought process, Lori, is you should know your audience. If they are finding your data really boring, you don't need to dwell on it. Just having it written down and kind of giving them a really broad overview is more than enough, and move on quickly.
Remember the 5th grade educated people.
Right.
That's
yeah.
what you need to remember.
Yep.
Well, that is awesome. I thank both of you, Trent and Jeff, for bringing your valuable insight today to Agent 21. It is so awesome to learn how you analyze things and also bring it to fruition during your presentation, and able to have those educated conversations as a trusted advisor. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day today to share that with us. And as always, this is recorded. We will get the link for everybody to watch at a future time. If you're not able to make this or couldn't write fast enough every single word that you wanted to write that you learned today. So thank you again so much for taking the time. We learned a lot, and everybody enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Bye.